Hello folks, J. Scott Phillips here and welcome to my channel. And today we are bound for the Brattle Book Shop in Boston, Massachusetts. This is a book haul video and I have never done one before. So I know a lot of booktubers will do book hauls fairly regularly or at least once in a while. I never have. I've never really felt, since I've been doing this channel, which is only since last summer, but I've never really had a book haul or a stack of books that I just come into possession of that I felt was either tall enough or interesting enough. I get a lot of books that are reference or resource type books and things that really are not of general interest. And there's maybe one or two in this stack here from the Brattle that we'll go through to you'll kind of get an idea of what I mean. But other than that, I've just never really felt I had a book haul that was video worthy. I guess we'll just leave it at that. But all that has changed with my trip to the Brattle. I was in Boston for a few days a couple weeks ago, and so I had to make that pilgrimage to the Brattle. Been hearing about it for a long time on Steve Donahue's channel. He talks about it quite a bit because he only lives a subway's ride away from the place. So he's there probably at least once a week, sometimes more, sometimes quite a bit more, and I can't blame him. He always talks about how the turnaround there is if you went there every day, you would find new books or different books that are swapping out there. And you never know what you're going to find, in particular in the sale lot. There's two sections of the Brattle. There's the Brattle proper, which is a building that's, I believe it's 3 floors high of categorized books. That is the bookstore of itself. If there's any more floors above that, you don't have access to them. I think it's only 3 floors. And then I know they've got a basement, which must go down another 200 or 300 feet. Down there, they've got offices and bookkeeping equipment and catacombs and things that I'm sure little Shanghai tunnels that lead to Cops Hill, all that kind of a thing down there. But next door to that is an open lot that is kind of between 2 other brick buildings there. And they have cart after cart after cart out there of uncatalogued or uncategorized books. So if you're looking for a particular book or a type of book, good luck. They're only organized out there by price. The carts out by the street, closest to the street, are $5. Then halfway back, they're $3. And clear in the back, they're $1. And then along either side, there are cabinets that get locked up at night that are, I think those are all $5 books. At least the ones that I was coming across there were 5. Bought a few of those. So I mentioned Steve Donahue. He was good enough to come out on a bright, sunny Saturday morning to meet up with me there at the Brattle. And I really appreciate that because I know that he had just was getting involved in a rather large project that is going to, it sounds like it's going to take up most of his summer. And he's actually having to cut back on the number of videos he's doing in order to accommodate the workload. So I really appreciated when he made the time to come out on a Saturday morning. Also, knowing that Saturday morning is not his favorite time to be there on a weekend. There's just more people there, and he likes to get there early during a weekday when he kind of has the place to himself. But he did come out. We met up. We chatted for a little bit. We browsed quite a bit. And it was good to meet him. And so, Steve, if you're watching, thanks for coming out. Now, let's get to the books that I bought there. And again, I say 40 plus pounds of books. And we'll just start going through them. We'll start with the larger ones here and work our way down to the small ones. But most of these are from the sale lot. A few of them are from inside. And we'll start with this one here, this big old book. The dust jacket is kind of beat up here. I'm going to have to reinforce this somehow. And it's called Romance of the Sea. And it's put out by National Geographic. And it's a book. Here, I'm going to take the dust jacket off of this so I don't just damage it any further while I'm handling it here. Because the rest of the book is pretty sound. So you can see on the cloth cover here, it's got a nice set of typography here, Romance of the Sea. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I usually don't do this kind of thing on my channel, but it's got a lot of full color plates, diagrams, illustrations, engravings, photographs, maps, you name it, all about the history of boats and ships, the evolution of the boat into the ship, articles about the history of shipping itself, all kinds of things. I've always been interested in the nautical world and sailing ships and the age of sail in particular. So, and I love artwork. If you've seen any of my videos before, you know I'm really interested in artwork. And so paintings or photographs, paintings in general or illustrations in general is what I really like, and particularly of sailing ships. And the more sails, the better. Look at that. That's two ships together there, but it's just great. So I'm looking forward to diving into this here. I'm gonna put the dust jacket back on here for just a second here. This I bought out on the these were the cabinets out in the sale lot there for, it was $5. That little yellow ticket there. Also, let me show you. I found quite a number of nautical books there that day I was there, and this one has the name of the previous owner here. If you can read that, what is it? It's Scott Seifert. He's signed his name into this book and others. I showed these to Steve while I was there, and he just kind of shook his head. He said, "Who would write their name in a book?" And I go, well, that doesn't bother me at all. I enjoy the history of the life of any particular book. If it's in my library, I don't mind if someone else has put their name in it or have any notes in it or anything like that. It doesn't bother me at all. That's a lived-in book, a loved book that somebody has, and now I've got it. So that doesn't bother me at all. Now, speaking of loved books, this is another one that I came across on the $5 shelves out there. And this is an old book. I think it was printed in, the 1800s, late 1800s. It doesn't have a copyright in it, but it's Milton's Paradise Lost with illustrations by Gustave Doré, one of my favorite illustrators of all time. And Steve was browsing through books a couple of book carts away from me when I found this, and I thought, this looks like it's been here for a while. The spine is falling apart rather badly here. There are some very loose pages up front, and so very delicate. $5 though, and I showed it to Steve, and I asked him, how did he manage to pass this by if it's been there for a while? And he just shook his head at me. He says, "It's falling apart. Its next stop is the dumpster." And I thought, well, I'm going to rescue it because I'm a huge Doré fan, and $5. I thought, if the very least, look at these engravings that are in here. They're just fantastic, classic Doré stuff. And in fact, I used one out of this book. I just did a video a couple of days ago about the H.P. Lovecraft short story, Pickman's Model. And in that story, he mentions Doré. And so I showed an example of it, and I actually was able to pull it out of this book here. And so the book has already served a purpose, but I do have to be careful with it. There's a place in town here in Orange County that does book repair, and they might be able to fix that for me. But for $5, how can you go wrong? I mean, I couldn't imagine this going in the dump. It's not going in the dumpster now, at least as long as I'm around. So there's that. Then this next one is kind of a reference or a resource book, the type I was telling you that doesn't usually make for a good book haul video. But this is not a proper book, but it's a mimeograph book from a copy machine that then has been bound with these notebook type of bindery here from Stanford. And this is titled, it is a practical treatise on railroads and the interior communications in general, written in 1838. So steam locomotives were pretty new then. It's just a lot of description of the engineering and I don't mean by driving the train, but more of the construction and mechanics of building locomotives back then. And I picked this up. Why would I want this? Well, for one thing, it's only $5, and this thing is huge. If you ever wanted a book like this, good luck in finding it. It's got these great fold-out charts and diagrams in the back here, pages and pages of that. Someone took some time at Stanford to put this together, but one of the projects I had years ago was I'm a big Western fan, and of the old TV series Maverick, starring James Garner and Jack Kelly in particular. I've always loved that program, and several years ago, I took it upon myself as a kind of a challenge to if you remember, if you ever watched that show, the theme song talks about how Maverick is riding the trail from who knows where. And I thought, I want to know where he's been and where he's going. So I started a ridiculously in-depth study of all the episodes, and I was able to track him across his wanderings through the West and through the country, or I should say he and his brother, different episodes, and their cousin Bo sometimes also. And by finding little clues that were never intended to be followed in the episodes, I was able to cobble together a history of the Maverick brothers and their travels as they crisscross through all those episodes, all out of order through the 1870s and 80s. And it's just a ridiculous, stupid endeavor, but I thought I could do it. And I started doing a website. I would create my own maps for it. And I called it Maverick Trails. It's still up online. I haven't done it in years and years because, thank you, Adobe Creative Cloud. You took away my Muse. That was the software I was using to be able to put this website together very easily. And a few years ago, they stopped supporting it because responsive websites was becoming a thing. And if I was going to continue it, I would have to switch over to WordPress or something that's a little more unwieldy for me. And I just never got around to rebuilding it. So, but I did it for several years, and there's a lot of episodes up there. But I thought what I could do is not only piece together all these disparate episodes into a cohesive thread, but also go through and kind of annotate all the episodes. So when something happens that is based on real American history of the Old West and all that, I would have entries to all those kinds of things. I would chart characters that would come and go, all kinds of things like that. And one of the things that I was getting into was the history of the railroad, and because that figured into a lot of the episodes. And so, as dry and dull as this is, if I ever get back to doing Maverick Trails again, there might be some gold nuggets in here. I don't know that, but I figured for $5, I'm going to pick it up. Then, here's a book that I found inside the shop, and it's the folio edition of the Folio Poets, and it's Rudyard Kipling. Where am I going? Rudyard Kipling. And this is in a really nice slipcase, a very nice book with these wood engravings. Now, these are a lot of Kipling's poems, and I've got a definitive or an authoritative book that is all beat up over the years of all of Kipling's poems. And this was a little bit more expensive. How much was this? This was $25 for this book here. And I was kind of wavering on it as I was looking at it, but it's got artwork in it. And these wood engravings by... I'm not doing a good job of holding books up to the screen. I'm not really used to doing this, but let's just see if I can find some examples here. So, by George Toot, or George Tuta. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but can you see that? There's all kinds of these cool little engravings. There's Kipling there with his pith helmet. But I was still going to pass it up until I found an illustration in here for one of it's probably my second favorite Kipling poem, Tomlinson. And I'm not going to be able to find it here now, but just as an example of some of the other ones here. Oh gosh, this is an illustration from Tomlinson here. it's a ghost story. It's a poem about a guy who dies and goes to hell, gets thrown out of there. He's not worthy, so he winds up going to hell. He gets thrown out of there because he's not worthy, and they just both heaven and hell send him back to try again. Very funny poem, but great illustrations. These woodcut diagrams, drawings here by George George Toot. And so I could not pass that up. Let me put it back in the slipcase here. Very nice book. And we'll move on here to the next book. This is another one I wonder how it might have gotten past Steve Donahue if he'd seen it, because I know he's a fan of this sort of thing, and it's in good shape. A $5 book. He probably already has it. It's by Charles Addams, and it's his bunch of New Yorker cartoons that he did, a lot of them featuring the Addams family. And if they're not in it, then it's got other kind of creepy stories here. There was where was the one that I found that was kind of funny here? We see Pugsley and Wednesday. They're lighting a fire in the chimney, and there's Gomez and Morticia in the doorway, just kind of admiring their little kids there. And the caption is, the little dears, they still believe in Santa Claus. So they've got the fireplace all ablaze in hopes that St. Nick soon will be there. So a book of Charles Addams cartoons, that's great. And then we'll move on now to, here's another one that is, this is a little more readable, but for Maverick Trails or for anyone who enjoys Western Americana, it's called American Paddle Steamboats. And it is just a book that's great. These end papers here have all these ads for signing on a riverboat back in the days when you could, get into a nice cigar smoking poker game, and lots of engravings and such of old riverboats, steamboats, and paddle wheelers. Now, years ago, I used to work during college. I worked at Disneyland, and I always wanted to work the Mark Twain. That's the giant paddle wheeler that circles Tom Sawyer's Island 1,000 times a day. And several years after college, I was working again for Disney, but as a designer. And during Christmas, the Christmas holidays, the regular hourly employees that work the park all the time every year would get a couple nights off and get to go into the park and enjoy the park as guests rather than having to work it. But in order to run the parks, they would recruit. They drafted us basically to go. Anyone who was working there salaried would have to get trained on something and go and work the Christmas parties so that the regular hourly employees could come in with their families and go Christmas shopping and enjoy the shows and all that thing without having to run the place themselves. And one year I got trained on the Mark Twain on the riverboat, and I got to be a riverboat pilot just like Mark Twain himself was. And I got to ring that bell and blow that horn and all that, just like I'd always wanted to do since I was a kid. And that was just great for about an hour. And after that, it was very boring. I found out later that the cast members that run the Mark Twain in just as their regular job call it the floating break room. There's just nothing to do because, of course, it's on a track and it all operates automatically. You're just on there really for show. But moving right along, this is another book on tall ships, another sailing vessels and ships and boats and things, and again owned by Scott Seifert. There's his name again. So I'm assuming that this is someone who was either doing a huge book purge or maybe someone passed away and his entire collection of nautical books wound up at the Brattle. But another picture book and stories and articles, chapters about old sailing ships. And then this book here is quite a fine, really nice leather-bound book here. And this was also only $5. And what this is bound collections of the old Punch magazine from the UK, from England back in the 1800s. It was kind of a humor magazine of satire and funny articles and stories and political, kind of taking shots at the military and all that. They always had these great old engravings, and this is just a fantastic volume here that I can't wait to dig into. Then we're halfway through. Here's another book on the American Railway, and is this one by? No, this is. I don't know who wrote this. It's a Castle book, so it's just a kind of a collection of books and stories, and I keep holding it up so I can see it. I got to hold it up. I'm not used to doing this. Engravings and articles from different books and magazines, I think, collected in one volume here. So I had to get that. This was only $1, $1 for that. Then here is a biography of Grant Wood, a fantastic artist and illustrator of the 20th century. And I have never read a biography of him. This is Grant Wood, A Life by R. Tripp Evans. So I don't think there's a lot of artwork in. Oh, there is. There's quite a bit of artwork. Oh, this is going to be great. Yeah, so not too bad. This one was, I got this on the inside, inside the shop for $10. So look at this stack growing back here. Then here is a nonfiction book. This is called Three Scientists and Their Gods. And the title sold it to me here. I'm just reading a little bit about it on the inside flap, but it's a little kind of short biographies of three scientists of the 20th century that were brilliant in their fields, but they also had faith. And a lot of times people will think, well, science and religion don't necessarily mix if you're a scientist doing serious work, but it can happen, and we're going to read about some of those stories in this book here. This was a $5 book out in the sale lot. Then now here's the Stephen Ambrose book, Nothing Like It in the World, another railroad book here, and it's his telling of the history of the Transcontinental Railroad. And I have never read this book. I have his books on the Panama Canal and the Brooklyn Bridge, and those are both really interesting books to read. And this one hits close to home because of the history of the American West, but I've never read it. I've never had it. So looking forward to that one. And then we're back to Kipling again here. This one was, this is from the $3 carts out in the sale lot here. A biography of Kipling that I have never seen or read. It's by Martin Seymour Smith. The one Kipling book I've got is the Lord Birkenhead edition, the authorized version, so it'll be interesting to compare it to that one there. But Kipling is probably my favorite author of all time, and then Mark Twain would come after that, and then on down the line. But I know Kipling is considered controversial. I understand that in a way, but come on, it's Rudyard Kipling. He was writing in his time, and it should not be controversial any more than the Holy Bible has some things in it that probably should be re-examined. Moving right along. Here we've got another nautical book. This is Epics of the Sea, and by reading the flap inside, it's by, who wrote this? A. Hockling wrote this book. And again, nonfiction, another nautical book here, and it talks about several ships that met disasters and the stories about those, and so that looks pretty interesting. For how much was this one? This was a $3 book from the sale lot. Almost there. We're getting there towards the end now. Then here is a book that had been on the $3 shelf and then got marked down to the $1 cart. And this is a Reader's Guide to Herman Melville. So there's old Moby Dick there on the cover, who we all know so well here. But one of the great things that I love about Melville, and I think most people would agree, is that he doesn't tell just, in the case of Moby Dick, it's not just a story of a big whale and trying to capture him or kill him. It's got all kinds of metaphor and allegory that you can read between the lines and get so many other stories out of this one story here. And so a guide is helpful, because a book like Moby Dick or Billy Budd or White Jacket, or is he right, White Jacket, or is that Jack London? Getting confused here. Any of the stories that he has written have so much lurking in there that a guide can be helpful. Then there's a couple of little bookshelves when you first come in the door inside the shop, off to the side, of paperbacks, vintage paperbacks. And this one here is a C.M. Kornbluth book called Takeoff. It's a science fiction story about the first trip to the moon, the novel of the first moon rocket. This was published in 1952. So a little vintage science fiction here. Michael K. Vaughan might be interested in that. He might have one of these lurking in one of the many boxes in stately Vaughan Manor. But I had to pick that up. I don't think I've ever seen this book. And so now I've got it. Then, speaking of Michael K. Vaughan, he's got June on the Range coming up. That's his own original booktube event celebrating Western fiction. And so I found this vintage copy of The Daybreakers by Louis L'Amour. And this is one of the Sackett books. I think it's the first story chronologically in the Sackett series. And I have a couple other editions of it, but looks like a much older copy, so I had to pick this up for, I think it was $5 off of that vintage paperback shelf inside. And then on that same bookcase, no, this was on the dollar shelf out on the in the sale lot. This is Escape Velocity by Jason M. Huff. And I am not familiar with Jason M. Huff, but it looked pretty good by reading the description here. I'm a big science fiction fan as well as you should be. And so I thought I'd pick this up for $1. And then I hauled all those inside and put them on the shelves so that I could then hang out for the few minutes left that Steve Donahue was still there and chat with him. And I met Zach, who works in the bookshop there, a good friend of Steve's, who Steve has interviewed and done kind of duet videos on his channel, talking about books and book selling and how the operation of the Brattle, the day-to-day operations, those kinds of things, as well as some other topics that are very interesting. So it was good to chat with him as well. And so he packed all these up for me. He weighed them. It was 40 pounds. And was going to ship them to me by media mail, and said that it's going to take about 2 to 8 working days to arrive, to ship back to California. I wasn't going to lug these back on the plane with me. And it took 2 days. So I was home for a day, and then the next day I came home from work, and there were these 2 giant boxes on my porch that had already been delivered. But as I say, these were all bought and paid for, and then we were standing around chatting there for a little bit. And as Steve was talking to Zach, I was looking back at that little vintage bookshelf by the front door there, and I came across this. So a last minute purchase, kind of an impulse buy, Gunman's Land. And this is a collection of short story westerns. So another possible look for June on the Range. I like the cover in particular, so we'll probably chat about that at some point. And that's it. There is my stack of Brattle books there. I'm going to have to find some bookshelf room for that myself here. And there you have it. So hopefully I'll get to go back again sometime maybe next year. One of the big things I wanted to do going to Boston was I've never been to Fenway Park, and I grew up in Anaheim, California, so I have always followed the Angels. So I was going to go to Fenway in April, because the Angels were going to be playing the Red Sox at Fenway, and I was planning on that and starting to look into hotel accommodations and all that kind of thing, and realized that they were playing there during Patriots Day weekend, and the Boston Marathon was bumping up against that. And airline tickets and hotel accommodations were just through the roof. So I backed it off a month. But next year, I hope to get back to Boston while the Angels are in town, and probably come back with another stack of books like that. And that might be my next book haul, but I don't know if I'll be doing any more between now and then, unless a miracle happens, which could happen. Let's hope so. And that's it. So thanks for sitting through all these books. I hope I was holding them up so that you could see them well enough. Again, I'm not used to doing that. So maybe by next year I'll be better at it. So thanks for watching, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks a lot.